So you want to plant some pumpkins, or maybe some kind of squash, or gourds. Maybe you want to plant some cucumbers, or maybe even some melons. Well, these plants all belong to the same group. They're called the cucurbits, or the Cucurbitaceae. And although it would not be accurate to say they're all the same, there's a couple thousand species in this group, I would say that for the most part you can treat them all very similarly and come out with really good results. So in this video I'm going to show you what I do with cucurbits. Now you can definitely start cucurbits indoors, but where I live, southeast Michigan, our growing season is long enough and warm enough that they do really well if you just sow them directly into the ground. So that's what I'm going to do here. This strategy will work with pretty much any cucurbits, whether pumpkins, cucumbers, melons, gourd, squash, whatever, as long as you have enough space. And so I have a pretty nice space here. This is probably maybe 9 by 9 feet or so where I'm going to place my cucurbits. This particular breed that I'm going to grow is a hybrid between delicata and spaghetti squash. It just makes for a really sweet and large spaghetti squash. I call it magnicata. So this is what I'm going to be putting in this space, but its growth habit is very similar to just about any squash that you could put in the ground. So as I just said, you need space. And in this particular little area, I've got enough space for probably 4 mounds of squash. You can plant these squash either in groups or mounds, or maybe even in rows. I tend to lean toward mounds. So I'm just going to pick out 4 spaces here and put some decent sized holes. I'm going to make a bigger hole than I really need, just so that we've got room for what I'm going to do in here. For relatively large cucurbits like these squash, I would probably say put 3 feet in between, maybe even a little bit longer if you wanted. Alright, now that I've got my holes dug, I'm going to go ahead and put a big plop of last season's compost at the bottom of each of these holes. Nice big handful of it. That'll feed my squash all season long. I probably won't have to do much fertilizing as long as I do the work of getting compost into these holes right now. This is something that I also do with tomatoes and other starter plants that I start indoors. Spread those out so they cover up the bottom part of the hole pretty well. Okay. Now I'm going to sow my seeds in this hole, but what I don't want to do is to put them in direct contact with my compost. My compost is still pretty hot, and what I don't want to do is to fry my plants as soon as they germinate from all that nitrogen that's in that compost. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a few handfuls of soil here and just kind of sprinkle them on top, just to make a little bit of a buffer so that my seeds aren't in direct contact with that compost. So I've got kind of a little bit of a buffer there, but there's only about maybe a ½ inch of soil on top of that compost. So the minute that my seeds do sprout, they'll put their roots down and their shoots up, and they'll start feeding on that compost right away. So now I can sow my seeds. I tend to crowd my seeds, but I think I'm only going to put maybe 5 in each hole. That way they have enough leg room to kind of spread out where they need to, but also not so much room that it's a waste of space. So let's see, there's 5, okay. That'll leave me enough for my other holes. Okay, so now I'm just going to gently press those guys in. Again, I don't want them to come into direct contact with my compost, so I'm just going to sort of gently push them in a little bit and then cover them over. They don't need much soil on top. I mean, not much more than an inch. They can push through a lot of soil, but they don't need that much on top of them. In the past, I've had the tendency of burying my seeds a bit too deep. Give them a good packing down. You can even step on them if you want. Better contact means better germination and better growth. All right, so what I've done here, I've deliberately left a depression for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that when I water these, I hate when I grow something in a mound, and then when I water it, the water just runs off. So I've put these in a little bit of a depression so that when I water it, the water kind of puddles and gets right down to those seeds where I want it. My soil's pretty sandy, and so it dries out really fast. All right, so water those guys in really well. I usually water until there's basically a little puddle, a standing pool, just to make sure that that soil in the area is really well saturated. Okay, so now the last thing that I need to do, now that my seeds are composted, planted, watered in, I just need to cover these in a little bit of mulch. For this purpose, I prefer straw mulch, just because it's really light. The reason why I'm mulching them right now is not so much for weed suppression as it is for just water retention. So I'm just going to go ahead and mulch these guys up with some straw. All right, all good. So now you can pretty much sit back and relax. Once these start to germinate, remove the straw because they need light, and just weed them and take care of them as you would any other plant. One note I want to make before I leave is that I buried compost. That's always a little bit of a risk if you have critters in the area like I do. So it's best to do this in a fence. Or in my case, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set stones or pavers over these for the first day or two, just so I can give those seeds a chance to germinate without getting dug up by any critters. So if you want to plant some pumpkins, cucumbers, melons, squash, or gourds, and you're wondering what to do, this is what I do, and I get pretty good results. So, hope you can use it. Hope it's helpful.